It needs to be defined by the type of loan and the borrower's ability to pay it back. For instance, if too much debt is loaded onto any borrower, no matter what their credit score may be, it becomes that much more difficult for the borrower to make good on that loan. And a lot of the mortgages that banks were underwriting, interest-only loans with deceptively low teaser rates, for example, were subprime loans, even though the market didn't necessarily define them as subprime. For me, the summer of 2007 was déjà vu all over again. Banks were making bad loans, but the asset-backed and mortgage-backed securities markets kept buying them. As Citigroup CEO Chuck Prince famously pronounced in July 2007, "As long as the music is playing, you've got to get up and dance." Well, the music seemed to stop almost immediately after Prince made that ill-advised remark. Investors pulled out of the securitization markets, and just as in the late 1990s, lenders started falling like dominoes. If they couldn't borrow, they couldn't stay in business. I knew this story would end badly largely because I had lived through it once before. The fact that the protagonists were now the nation's leading banks and brokerage firms, not some lender of last resort paying old ball players to hawk second mortgages on late-night TV, was irrelevant. It boiled down to math, and math doesn't play favorites based on pedigree. If a company cannot fund itself and cannot pay its obligations, the lights will ultimately go out. Unless, of course, it gets a federal bailout. I saw early on what was happening, but at first a lot of people didn't want to hear what I had to say. Then I released an ominous report on Citigroup, and, to my shock, it became the shot heard round the financial world. The original and now famous call I made on October 31st, 2007, tripped a wire in the markets. The report raised concerns about mortgage losses at Citigroup and warned that the megabank might be forced to cut its dividend. When the stock market reopened the next morning, Citigroup stock plummeted, losing $17 billion in market value in one day. The S&P 500 dropped $374 billion. The call that I made was similar to warnings I would make throughout 2008 about other banks. The reality was that Citigroup and the entire banking industry had amassed entirely too much debt, and the all-night dance party of cheap and loose credit was over. Making matters worse, banks didn't even realize how much trouble they were in. A lot of the debt that they considered low risk was backed by residential real estate and other assets that were worth considerably less than they thought. Their financial statements were illusions, more like wishful thinking than clear-eyed accounting. The problem with too much debt is that it narrows the margin of error for both the borrower and the lender. A bad quarter becomes a catastrophic one on the turn of a dime if a company has played too close to the edge and the mood of the market shifts quickly. That proved true for Bear Stearns in the summer of 2007, just as it did for Citibank by the fall of 2007. By 2008, the entire financial system was essentially felled by debt overload and an inability to access cheap money. By 2009, the industry had lost over $600 billion in write-downs and destroyed over $500 billion in stock market valuation. How did this happen? And what might the sequel to this sad tale be? Looking for answers, I followed the money. Typically, the larger banks lend to the regions, businesses, and demographic groups demonstrating the highest rates of income growth. But during the housing boom, this approach became perversely self-fulfilling. By feeding the housing bubble, banks injected wads of new cash into local economies, generating new income for builders, decorators, real estate agents, and hardware stores. Everyone felt a little richer, which led to ever crazier bidding wars for homes on the market. Easy money had big consequences. Banks borrowed more so they could make the loans that allowed consumers to borrow more. This destructive, codependent relationship allowed the financial services industry to expand rapidly.